Good morning. Good morning. All right, welcome to chapel. This morning, we have a different sort of chapel service. We have Sonny Kelly with us. Mr. Kelly is a performer, a storyteller, speaker, comedian. He's acted, including Full House, you said, right?
Yeah.
Episode. So we're pleased to have him with us this morning. He's pursuing a PhD in communications and performance at UNC Chapel Hill. He's a graduate of St. Mary's and Stanford University. He is a veteran of the United States Air Force. As I mentioned, he has acted. He's a writer and director and performer in live theater. This morning, he will present selections from The Talk, a one-man show that draws on the voices of ancestors, elders, youths, and intellectuals to help us engage in those difficult conversations that we need to have. Please help me welcome Sonny Kelly.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Thank you. I always like to begin with going to the well from which I gain sustenance and inspiration, and that is the Word of God. So I'll start with John chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God." So I believe in the power of words. That's why I study communication. In a few months here, I'll be a professor, a doctor in communication, and I believe that communication has a great power to build bridges, and that's what The Talk does, and I'll share an excerpt with that, and I'm hoping we can have a little bit of a talk this morning before you all head off to class and life. But I want to start off by just saying that I believe in the power of words, and ask you if you believe. If you believe, say I believe. If you believe, say I believe. Now, if you really believe all the way in the back, say I believe. Thank you. I believe too. See, I believe in you and I believe in me. I believe that our words have the power to set people free. I believe that the things that we say can change them, those and they, to us, these and we. For you see, when we use our words responsibly, they have the power to teach and build, even heal. The words that we say can put wings on everything that you can think, dream, or feel. So man, woman, boy, girl, never forget that your words can and will change the world. A friend of mine a while ago taught me it's a very important maxim, very important lesson, a word of wisdom. He said, nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care. And it's through our words that we can share, that we understand, that we're reaching out. We don't always agree, but I want to learn you more. I want to connect with you more. I want to build bridges through my words. That's how we communicate, right? Now, of course, about 80 to 90% of our communication when we're first meeting each other is nonverbals. Like, I'm really thanking God right now that I have eye contact and nobody's asleep. Makes me feel good about myself. Thank you for communicating attention, love, and respect in that way. But once we engage with one another, you're not going to care about what I have to say until you know that I care. Secondly, he taught me, you got to meet people where they are, not where you want them to be, right? There are a lot of people in this world we may want to connect to, but we feel like, I don't understand you because I don't understand your opinion. I don't understand what side of the political aisle you're on. I don't understand where you come from, where you live, etc. But if I'm so concerned with where you are and it not being where I want you to be, then I'll never meet you. Meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. Secondly, we've got to love people for whom they are, not whom we want them to be. How many of us, especially young people, have felt like you've been striving for a career, striving for a personality, striving for a persona, especially online, that is really built upon what other people want you to be, trying to be loved by people who have certain expectations for you that were never meant to be placed upon you. And sometimes we do that to each other. And so I want to challenge us today to love people for whom they are right now, not whom we want them to be. And then finally, when we meet people where they are, love them for whom they are, we can lead them to where they need to go. And we can also be led to where we need to go. So The Talk, which you're about to see an excerpt of, is a daddy's difficult conversation with trying to work his way through this experience. And I want to challenge you all, as you see this, there may be some elements in it that trigger you or that may upset you or concern you. And I want you to know this piece is not at all about pointing fingers. It's not at all about It's not at all about trying to polarize people or label anybody or stigmatize anybody. It's about my personal experience. So for a moment, I want you to come into my world for a moment. With my words, I'm going to share with you an experience of where I am. And it all started with a small, short experience I had in a conversation with my son.
Brown baby, as you grow up, I want you to drink from the plenty cup. I want you to stand up, tall and proud. I want you to speak up, clear and loud. Brown baby.
I've only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. I didn't seek it, I didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give an account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. All right, you got everything? Backpack, lunch, glasses. Come on, man. You know the rules. Glasses should be where? In the case or on my face. I got them, Daddy. All right. Looking good, my man. Hey, and make sure you don't leave any fruits or vegetables in that lunch bag today, all right? Eat it all, you hear me? Don't you bring another piece of broccoli back to my house, you understand? But Daddy, sometimes I run out of time at lunch. I bet you don't ever run out of time to drink chocolate milk or eat pizza, do you? Don't you bring another piece of broccoli back to my house, you got it? Yes, sir. Hey, who loves you? Daddy and Mommy. Who? Daddy and Mommy. That's right. How much do we love you? Mucho, mucho, mucho. You got it. What's that mean? A lot, a lot, a lot. That's right. A lot, a lot, a lot.
Top story is breaking right now in Baltimore, where rioting is broken out in the streets. Violent clashes between police and roving groups have left several police officers injured and turned one West Baltimore neighborhood into chaos. This violence comes just hours after Freddie Gray, who died under mysterious circumstances last week while in police custody, was laid to rest in...
Son, we need to talk. Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Good evening. Actually, good morning, my friends. I said good morning, my friends. Good morning. Thank you. I know it's early, but thank you. It's about time we had a talk. In this often confusing, always uncertain, painfully thought-provoking age of the postmodern, the post-colonial, the post-racial, the post-whatever else you want to call it. We need to talk. Where black lives matter, right? Yes. Blue lives matter. Hey, all lives matter, right? And yet somehow we all end up sadder because we need to talk. And I don't have time for platitudes or political correctness, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to tell it like a T.I. is. As the good book says, the truth shall set you free, amen? But first, I need to know something. Can we talk? No, friend, that's a real question from me to you. Can we talk? Can we talk? Family, can we talk? Yes. Thank you. The talk, as it has come to be known, is a resounding epidemic in communities of color in these United States. It is an activated artifact of an age long gone, a new craze based on an old habit. It's the kind of talk that Mamie Till had with her only child, 14-year-old Emmett, back in the summer of 1955, as she nervously packed him up for a trip from his native Chicago to visit her family down in Money, Mississippi. On that bright, sunny August morning, Emmett was warned in the deep, desperate tones of a mother who knew all too well the dire danger that Jim Crow justice posed to the bodies of bright black boys from Chicago. She called him by his nickname. Now, Bo, you listen here, Bo. Please, just put a handle on all those yeses and nos. Say yes, ma'am, or no, sir. Say yes, Mr. So-and-so, and no, Mrs. So-and-so. That talk turned out to be their last. Just a few days later, Emmett Lewis Till would be beaten, murdered, his body tossed into the Tallahatchie River by Roy Bryant and his half-brother J.W. Milam, two angry white men who merely suspected that Emmett had flirted with a white woman, Roy's wife, Carolyn. Shortly after Roy and J.W. were found not guilty by a jury of their peers, they openly admitted to the murder. Mamie insisted on an open casket funeral. Have you ever sent a loved son on vacation and had him return to you in a pine box so horribly battered and waterlogged that someone needs to tell you that this sickening sight is your son, lynched? Let the people see what I've seen. I think everybody needs to know what has happened to Emmett Till. Now, I like to think things have changed since 1955, right? Well, back in 2012, on Sunday, February 26, in Sanford, Florida, a 17-year-old black boy named Trayvon Martin was stopped by a community watch patroller named George Zimmerman, a man who merely suspected that Trayvon was a criminal. Armed with only a bag of Skittles and a can of Arizona tea that he just purchased from a local convenience store, Trayvon was stopped, shot, and killed that night. The following year, shortly after George Zimmerman was found not guilty of Trayvon's death, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder addressed the NAACP. Trayvon's death last spring caused me to sit down to have a conversation with my own 15-year-old son, like my dad did with me. This was a father-son tradition I hope would not need to be handed down. But as a father who loves his son and who is more knowing in the ways of the world, I had to do this to protect my boy. I am his father, and it is my responsibility not to burden him with the baggage of eras long gone, but to make him aware of the world he must still confront. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. I'm reminded of the words of Howard L. Kraft in his piece, Grandma's Letter to Peanut during his freshman year. I was bragging on you to Mrs. Johnson Sunday. My big rusted butt grandson is a freshman in college. I remember when you was playing with Power Rangers. Now look at you, all grown up and smart and handsome. Still, there's some things I want you to keep in mind. I ain't worried about you studying. You always made A's. And your mama and your daddy don't talk to you about drinking and them fast-tailed gals. So I ain't much concerned about that neither. Just remember, that college you go to is mostly white. And you're going to have plenty of white friends. But the world y'all share ain't the same. When you get stopped by the police, you put your hands on the wheel. You look straight ahead and don't make no quick movements. Say yes, sir, and no, sir, and don't ask no questions. Just take the ticket and we'll deal with it later. And if the lights ever come on behind you at night, you don't stop until you in a public place. Now, I know you done heard this 100 times, but the time you don't heed it, we'll be headed to Greer's funeral home to make arrangements. And my heart couldn't take that, baby. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. The talk has emerged as a sort of undesired discursive heirloom, an habitual hand-me-down from generation to generation, a persistent reminder that on any given day in this great land, the location, disposition, and recognition of any particular black body may place that body into the crosshairs of imminent deadly force. Son, we need to talk. And that is the first 10 minutes of a one-man piece, a performance, a play that I call The Talk. And I challenged myself to be honest about this experience that I had with my son. I literally was listening to the radio and heard about a black man dying, which is a common experience in our world. We hear about in the media often about people dying, but especially black men dying from some sort of violence. And I looked into my back seat. I saw this beautiful black boy, this beautiful brown chocolate skin that he gets from his mother. These tight eyes that hide behind the rounded folds of his cheeks when he smiles. He gets those from me. His curly hair, tightly curly hair, designed by God to grow from his scalp and protect his precious brain from the intense African sun. And his name is Sterling. Now, Sterling means little star, literally, but figuratively it means pure and thoroughly excellent. I named him on purpose because he's my star, right? But I look at this beautiful boy named Sterling, pure and thoroughly excellent, and all I can see in that moment is a black boy who will one day become a black man. A black man who will look an awful lot like the pictures I had seen on CNN and other news networks of the now deceased Freddie Gray. And I present to you not a political ploy. I present to you not some kind of diatribe about identity politics, just a daddy's love for his son and how tough that conversation was and how tough that experience was. And I blame that on no one. I just know it was. And sometimes all we can do is share what we know and try to meet people where we are. And so I wanted to share with you all, just to kind of tie this together today, a scripture that came to my mind, a story that came to my mind that comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 4, verses 1 through 27. And I'll paraphrase it. I won't even get up here and read it. Jesus is going to Judea and he has to go through Samaria. There's a group of people in Samaria, the Samaritans, the Samaritans, and they are not Jewish. They are kind of a hybrid. They share similar roots to the Jewish people, but they're different. They're seen as lesser. The Jewish people don't hang out with the Samaritans and talk to them because they are seen as people who don't fully understand the faith. They're seen as kind of and excuse my language here, but it's a term that's appropriate. They're kind of a bastard people. They're kind of a hybrid. They don't know who their real legacy goes back to. They all agree on Abraham and Jacob, but then there's a split somewhere in there. So the Jewish people see the Samaritans as a bastard people, right? As something that's different. And so they decide to go through Samaria, which is not something normally they would do. It'd be like if you're going from point A to point B and you decide, let me go through this bad neighborhood on my way there. Like, why are you doing this, JC? You don't need to do that. But he did so many things he didn't seem to need to do, right? He goes through Samaria and he finds this woman at the well. And the Bible says he's weary. This is the Son of God. He can do whatever he wants to do, right? But he's weary. His body is weary because he lives in this human body. And the first thing he does is he admits that he has a need. The second thing he does is he asks a person who's different from him. He meets her where she is and says, give me some water, please. I need some water. So he admits that he has a need, that he's not perfect. He doesn't have it all. Something that I wish I could see on these political pundits, you know, whether it's CNN or Fox or MSNBC. I try to watch them all to kind of see what's going on because we're in a season where everything is this really heightened, right? There's a lot of polarization. And I really want to get it as right as I can. So I watch everybody. I listen to everybody because I want to see what's going on, right? So instead of just saying, hey, look, I'm going to shut you down because I disagree with you, he's like, hey, I'm going to meet with this person and I'm going to admit I have a need. I don't fully understand everything that's going on here. I want to learn from you, right? I'm not going to be so offended that I can't connect to you and treat you as a human and share words with you. So he admits he has a need. He asks her for water. And then she's like, dude, you know, you don't even have a bucket. What are you talking about? And he knows he doesn't have a bucket because it's not about the water. It's about her. He cares to connect to her. And she says, you know, if you want water, you have to have a bucket. He said, if you knew who you were talking to, you would know that I'm a person who can give you living water. He affirms his truth. Sometimes we feel like to say our truth, to share our experience, we have to shut somebody else down. Well, your experience is not as great as mine. I've been more oppressed than you. I know more about you. I've read more than you. All this comparison, and you cease to be yourself, but rather you become a comparison of others, and you become just the difference from the other person, right? At what point do we find out who you are and what you have? He affirms, I've got living water. He knows who he is. It doesn't matter who she is. Who she is does not change who he is, right? And then finally, she says, okay, you got some living water? I want some of that. Talk to me. He says, go get your husband. She says, ha, gotcha. I'm not married. He says, oh, I know, you're on your fifth husband. I get it, but just go get him. He accepts where she is. He doesn't point fingers on her and say, you know, divorce is wrong in our religion. You know, you're on the fifth guy right now. That kind of makes you kind of looser than you need to be. This is Bible days too. This is really bad. Look, let me tell you about yourself. Let me come for you. He could have done that. But instead, he accepted her for where she was and said, go get your husband. I know that's what you call him your husband, whatever you want to call it. I'm not here to talk to you about names and about labels and about identity politics. I'm here to connect to you. So whatever it takes for you to go tell this person who's your partner at the time to come back here so I can give them living water, because it's not about the water, it's not about the labels, it's not about Samaria, it's not about Jewish people. It's about you and me and living water and life. Because we need each other. We have to communicate. We have to share. This is how we build meaning. And if we keep pushing each other away because of the differences, because of misunderstandings or multiple understandings, we'll never come to that place where we can develop relationship. And where in this case, he can give them living water. And so when she realizes he's not judging me, he knows my truth, but he's meeting me where I am, she goes back and she becomes one of the first evangelists in the Bible, right? She goes back and gets her whole town to come to Christ from that experience. And I share that story with you because it reminds me that, yes, we have differences. And yes, some of those differences are painful. We have some deep-seated issues in this country that come around economics, that, yes, come around race, that come around class, that come around politics, religion, that so often we run away from because we forget that sometimes what you think of as a distraction is really your destination. We as human beings, we are each other's respective destinations. So all this energy we expend trying to avoid conflict, trying to make ourselves feel better about ourselves because at least I'm not them, trying to stand up for what we believe in while pushing other people down and silence them, is counterproductive, because what it does is it makes us forget who we really are. We are social beings. We are community. We are designed to be community. At this university, you're designed to be community, and working out community is often uncomfortable. And that's okay because it's worth it. I always say in the play, the truth shall set you free, but the truth can often be uncomfortable. And I'm not asking anyone to get comfortable with the discomfort. suck it up, none of that. But I'm saying let's get used to the discomfort. And let's realize that this person in front of me is my destination and they are worth the discomfort. If I can find a way not to shut them down, not to be so offended by what they just said that I say, psh, you won't ever get it. But rather to hear out their side and realize, just like that parable of the 10 blind men who are trying to figure out what an elephant is. There's a blind man who's on the tail and says, yeah, it's kind of fuzzy and furry. Maybe it's like a gerbil, I don't know. There's a blind man who's over here on the side. He's like, this thing is a wall. It's a big, hard wall. There's a blind man over here by the ear and said, no, it's a smooth piece of leather. Yeah. Then there's a blind man in the front and said, no, this thing's like a snake. We better get away from this thing. It's like a python. They're all right. But it's not until they come together and communicate that they realize they all know parts of what's really at hand, right? And so I wanted to just close today. I know I want to get you all off to class and on time with a moment to where we can begin this process of having challenging conversations. I don't believe in safe spaces as much as I believe in courageous spaces. Spaces where we can be courageous with one another, knowing that your toes are going to be stepped on sometimes, because we don't all know. We don't all know our backgrounds, but everyone in this room is an expert. You are an expert in your own background, in your own lived experience. For me to tell you who you are is not only a disservice to you and an injustice, but it is a dishonor to God who created you differently so that we could all be better together and learn from each other. So we've got to have a safe place where we can ask the tough questions of each other. Here's a question that people asked me growing up. Does your hair get wet? Oh, my people of African descent, have you ever been asked that question? It's funny, you laugh because you know you've been asked that, especially the girls, especially the females, because your hair tends to be longer, right? Or anybody who has longer hair. Does your hair get wet? And I know there's some white people in this room who are like, I was wondering the same thing. It kind of beads up. Does it get wet? I don't know. And you're not comfortable asking, right? Because it is kind of an embarrassing question to ask. And depending on the day and how many times people have asked me, I might be offended when you ask me that question. But it's a valid question, y'all. People don't know. If you haven't been born with that kind of hair, you don't know. And the answer is, yes, it gets wet, but our hair it's designed in such a way that it does kind of deflect the water to some degree. It doesn't soak in like it soaks in for straight hair. And we need to actually moisturize our hair because our hair tends to get drier than y'all's hair. So oily hair for us is a good thing. It's not dirty at all because our hair gets dry. So we need to oil our scalps, oil our hair, keep it nice and lovely and soft. I see just keep it. But don't ask to touch it, please, because I'm not a dog. So we learn from each other. I would like to touch some things as well, right? But realize I'm a human, so I'm not a museum, I'm not an artifact, I'm not a dog, I'm not an object. So if you were close friends and we're cool like that, and you say, you know what, I've always wondered what it feels like. Would you mind if I touch it in privacy? We could talk about that, but especially not in public. No, oh, can I touch it? No. And if I get offended or if I say don't, it doesn't mean that I don't like you or don't want to talk to you. It just means that I've experienced this for a long time, especially those who've been raised around people who are not of African descent. People have been asking us these questions for a long time. And so there's a bit of grace that we ask you to lend to us. But then people of African descent, on behalf of people with straight hair, I'm going to ask you, extend grace to them. They don't know. We don't know until we ask. And if you don't become a safe place for people to ask, we will never have a safe place to connect and build community. So yes, our hair gets wet, just not wet in the same way. Right? So I opened with that little faux pas of a situation. Questions or thoughts? And by the way, if you ever get a chance to see the talk, it's an hour-and-a-half piece, and you can go to sonnykelly.com, SONNYKELLY.com, to kind of see the ministry and the work that I do. I'm about building communities. I'm not about calling anybody out. I'm about calling people in to see how we can do better by each other, right? Just from my own personal experience. I don't take on anybody else's political view. This is what I know from my body. With that said, when you ask a question or make a comment, it's not at all about calling anybody out. It's just about, like, what are some things that we need to be talking about here at King to do better by each other? Or questions we may have, even about the piece. Something that struck you, something you thought, oh, that was interesting, or that was thought-provoking. I'm gonna grab some water here.
I like that you quoted Langston Hughes. Who else did you quote?
Thank you. Tell me your name? Aaron. I quoted Langston Hughes, so that whole Let America Be America Again. Later on in the play, I quote James Baldwin. There's a local poet named Howard L. Kraft. The grandma's Grandma's Letter to Peanut, where I'm the old lady there. I'm kind of playing my own grandmother, but that's an actual kind of, it's a poem that he wrote in his book that he published back in 2016, I believe. And so Howard L. Kraft is a local poet that I got that piece from. I also do, Eric Holder, I just went online and I saw a poem, I mean, not a poem, but I saw that speech that he gave to the NAACP. And the reason why I chose that speech is because it kind of captured what I was feeling, having to give the talk to my son, right? Later on in the play, though, in the very first poem, I've only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. That's a poem called God's Minute by Benjamin E. Mays, one of the first presidents of Morehouse University, or Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And I used to teach that to kids at church when I was a youth pastor at a church where we were trying to like motivate the boys and teach them like inspirational poems. So that's called God's Minute, about the importance of just 1 minute. And sometimes you only have a minute with a person, right, to make that first impression. And we have to realize this first impression should not be about how cool you are or how great you look or even your political party or what. It should be about love and light. I mean, if we're really walking this faith thing out, like I represent Christ to the world the best way that I can. So in that moment, how can I meet you where you are and love you and make the most, because eternity can be in that moment, right? And in my case, I had about a minute to talk to my son about this issue, race in America. And I say, how do you explain to a 7-year-old his all-encompassing blackness in a minute? It's really tough to do, right? And it's not that I desire my blackness to be all-encompassing, but when I walked into this room, 99.9% of you said, okay, black guy, whatever, you assess that, whatever it means to you. We do that in America. We just do. I do it, right? And so I've worked through using the words of James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Benjamin E. Mays. I also, later on in the piece, Jarek, who else comes up in W.E.B. Du Bois, yeah, the Souls of Black Folk. Paul Gilroy, Ta-Nehisi Coates is in the play as well. My mother, my father, my grandparents. So I did some oral history interviews, qualitative analysis. This is part of my dissertation as well. So it's kind of a qualitative analysis of what the talk is, what it means, how it moves through the world. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that question. Thoughts, questions?
As you talk to young people that are a little younger than me, who I grew up in a segregated society. The black kids, the first time I ever was in class with African Americans in the 7th grade.
Yeah.
And, black folk had to go to a separate place in the theater. We had to sit in the balcony to go to one theater in my little hometown. There was only one doctor in town that would treat African Americans. African Americans had to go in the back door of the hospital.
Yeah.
I sense that a lot of people in younger generations really don't understand that. You can read about it. Do you sense that people in younger generations really don't know and grasp what it was like for folks like you not to have the same rights as people like me?
Yeah.
Solely because of your skin color.
Thank you. Tell me your name.
My name is Aubrey.
Aubrey.
Aubrey
Lee? Like General Robert E. Lee.
No.
No, listen, Aubrey, I want to say this, but I was
trying to get around it.
and I don't say that to stigmatize you. Robert E. Lee was one of the greatest, and I'm going to say this in this body, was one of the greatest tacticians of our time, were greatest strategic war fighters. But he said a beautiful, wise thing in 1869 when people asked him about Confederate monuments and whether we should put them up. And he said, I think it wiser, moreover, not to keep open the souls of war, but to follow the examples of those nations who have endeavored to obliterate the marks of civil strife and to commit to oblivion the feelings thereof. So he was saying, we've had a tough time. I fought hard, y'all fought hard, but let's not keep on putting monuments and stuff. And remember, let's get together as a republic and let's move forward. And so I admire the man now. I had looked that quote up in studying this. So I had to stop, even though I thought, Robert E. Lee, I'm black, I'm not supposed to want to even study him. I said, no, let me put all that aside and let me listen and read. And I realized he was a great thinker. He was also a man of peace in his later years and wanted to reconcile and make the country a better place. So, take the bitter with the sweet. There's tension in everything, right? And I think God's intention is for us to deal with the tension. So with that said, my father grew up in the segregated South, and he informed me of a lot of things. I grew up in California, where I was amongst many other kids of all different colors, right? And so I didn't experience discrimination and racism in the way that he did. And so I was a little bit clueless about it as well. And I think this generation, younger people coming up, remember, we always, of course, February, we talk about the marches and Dr. King and the civil rights movement. They kind of have an understanding of those things, but there's not the same grounding. A lot of young people, we find it hard to give them the talk because they're like, oh, I got this, I'm good, don't worry about it. But I think in 2016 forward, with a lot of the video that we've seen online of some police brutality, but just people in authority kind of judging, especially young black people, and hurting their bodies. And then you look at the school to prison pipeline, which is a real thing. Like, a black child is 3 times more likely to live in poverty than a white child in America. 4 times more likely to be suspended from school, and 5 times more likely to end up incarcerated. Now, there are many reasons why that exists, but it is certainly a pipeline, and it's happening. So I think that young people nowadays understand what racism is, but they understand at that systemic level that there are things that are happening that are not outright like they used to be, but they're still happening, right? I think the challenge I have with young people is first acknowledging where we come from, acknowledging that we are better than we were. Because a few decades ago, I would not have been here in this skin, in this chapel, doing what I'm doing now. We are better than where we used to be. Let's be honest with that. But then the third challenge is also realizing that we have more work to do, right? And that work to do has to be done together. And that's a difficult thing to do, but we have to find ways to build coalitions and teams to look at racism in its, as we call it, in its capillary levels. Capillaries, the small blood vessels, all my bio people, right? So racism now operates at this capillary level that's not as obvious as black bathrooms, white bathrooms are colored in white, but there are these elements that just are kind of subtle, and you can't quite name it sometimes, but you just know it, and you feel uncomfortable about it. I have white friends, for example, who have been stopped by police officers of all backgrounds, because I think everybody tends to judge certain people who look in a certain way, regardless of who the viewer is, right? We see it in the media all the time. You see young black people, especially males, especially if they have dreads, especially if their pants are low, whatever the case may be, and we instantly start to criminalize them in our first order thinking, right? It happens. But I've talked to a lot of my friends who are white males who say, yeah, I got stopped by the police with my friends, and they treated my friend totally different than they treated me. And that let them know, oh wow, there's something going on here. Right? It's not always just one bad apple. There's just kind of a certain way we treat people in our society. And I don't think it has to do with pointing fingers and calling people racist, but rather just realize there are still some traces from where we come from that are still part of who we are and how we operate with each other. So it's important that we're honest with that. Think about this. Black people, people of African descent in this country, have been enslaved in this country for longer than we've been free in this country. If you go back to 1619 and come up to today, we've got 250 some odd years of slavery and less than 200 years of freedom. And in that, we had Jim Crow, and we had the segregation that you're talking about. In the midst of that, freedom, right? So we're all kind of still learning each other in some ways. We're a young nation, and our freedom is young as black people, right? So it's going to be a kind of a complicated walk through this thing, but what we've got to do is talk about it and connect with it. Because back in that day with segregation, people didn't talk about it. That was just the way it was. You just deal with it. And now what I'm finding is that black people, black parents especially, we talk to our kids about it because they have to know. Because when you go in the world, some people are going to see you as a black person, and that's it. Some people are going to be super cool with you, you're good, but you never know what you're going to get. It's a precarious situation for you, son, is what I tell my son, right? On the white side, you don't want your kids feeling all guilty and being all concerned about white privilege and feeling bad about that and all that stuff that people are putting on them, because they ought not walk around feeling bad just because they're white. You ought not walk around saying, well, my ancestors are slave owners, so I pretty much shouldn't have any say in this room and I pretty much suck. And I have students who feel that way, and I have to say, no, you are beautiful and wonderful. I want to hear your story. So we have white people who don't want to talk about race. And they don't want to talk to their kids about race because they love their kids and they don't want to put that on their kids. So you've got two groups of people, both love their kids. One is talking about race all the time to their kids to protect them. One is stopping it and not talking about race to protect them. How do we get to a place where we can talk about humanity and realize that race is part of it, and we can protect them together so they don't grow up in enmity from one another, right? So I think it's about talking about that stuff some more, because a lot of folks, either we've got young black folks especially who talk about it and they get kind of angry, or don't want to deal with it at all, because sometimes you get angry and all of a sudden you become the angry black woman. Right? And so, okay, don't let your neck go like this at all. Okay. Oh, here she comes. Okay, I'm done. And then everybody starts backing up off you, right? So you have especially a lot of black women who feel like they can't even be angry or upset about something, because if they show any emotion, all of a sudden she becomes the angry black woman stereotype, and you watch people back away from the conversation from you. You're like, no, I'm just telling you, I'm excited about this conversation. Let's keep having it. And then there are folks who are, especially my white males, I love my cis hetero white males. We have all these labels we put on people, right? When I teach a class, when I say I love everybody, but one of the first things I have to do at UNC Chapel Hill, one of the most liberal campuses on this nation, is tell all of if you're a cis hetero white male, I won't ask you to identify yourself, I won't out you, but I want you to know you have permission to speak in my class. Wow, it sounds funny, right? The most quote-unquote privileged group in our society, the most powerful group in our society, physically strong, mentally, etc. But I walk into my classroom and I see people that I see are white males and they shut down and won't talk. And it's not because they're jerks. It's because they want to be safe, because they never know what they're going to say that's going to offend somebody else and they're going to get shut down. That's not okay. We have environments where people are afraid to speak for their respective reasons. As a teacher, how am I going to connect you to communication? You may pass the test, but how can we become better people if everybody's afraid to speak because I don't want to offend, I don't have any right to speak on that. I've never been oppressed. Okay, great. But your ancestors many of your ancestors, white people, were indentured servants, which is close enough to slavery to me to see a bit of a comparison. Many of your ancestors were sharecroppers right along with black folks. Many of your ancestors did not have access to many of the things we didn't. It's not the same thing, but let's find some connections and some points and stop denying what we have in common. It's a long, convoluted answer to a great question. Hope I got around to it some, but I think studying the history and learning about those things and acknowledging what you went through, what my father went through happened, that we're better off than that, but we still have some vestiges, some remnants of that we've got to deal with together is important. I think some people don't get to that last part. So I'm a rabble rouser. I come to start conversations, and my goal and my hope is that as you leave this place, that I've opened up some fissures and some possibilities for you to look at somebody who doesn't look like you, live like you, or love like you, and just have a conversation. Like, what's your side of this living experience like? What's your part of the elephant like? And get to know each other and have grace with one another and know you're gonna step on toes. You're not always gonna get it right. Especially have grace for my white males because they're in a really tough place. The radar's on them. They can't say anything nowadays without it being turned around. I'm just going to say, I have the privilege of having the microphone right now. I got the conch from my Lord of the Flies folks, right? And I have this skin so I can say it. We got to let white males speak, because when you shut them down, they feel like they're not loved, they're not respected, they're not a part of the American dream, and we all ought to be. And then they start to go underground and try to find a place where they can be affirmed. Or we're wondering, why are we seeing all this white supremacy and neo-Nazis, etc.? There's a bunch of guys in that group who are like, I don't really agree with the neo-Nazis at first, but at least I'm loved, at least I can speak, at least I'm not walking on eggshells with them. And so we've got to have grace for one another. Meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. Love them for whom they are, not whom you want them to be. Then we can all lead each other to where we need to go. Remember, nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care. So go out there and care for someone with some eye contact, with a conversation, asking questions, feeling each other out, and having grace for people, for one another as we go through this muddy, mixed up, uncomfortable process of communication and building bridges. Because we're better together. God bless you. Have a great day.
He gave the charge, go and care for